Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for the Planning and Zoning Commission for July the 9th. It's not too long. We have one public hearing. It's kind of a short agenda of items tonight. So, first item, though, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank all of you all for the big turnout on the public hearing. It's nice to see all of you out tonight. First item for us, item 2, is approval of the minutes. Any additions, deletions? If not, I need a motion to approve.
I'll move approval.
David, and second?
I'll second.
Clara? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Item 3, a public hearing. Richard Byrd, ex-county commissioner, request to rezone 1.7 acres of light industrial to general commercial. The subject property is located northwest corner of U.S. Highway 1 and 57th Street, east of Old Dixie. It's quasi-judicial. Would anyone who cares to speak from the audience get sworn in, please? Dick, if you're going to talk, you need to stand up also.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay. Stephen, you got a presentation. Let's see what we got.
Good evening, Chairman Hamner. My name is Stephen Dirduff with the Community Development Department. This evening we have a rezoning for what is 2 separate parcels totaling 1.7 acres. As you indicated here on the location map, they are on 57th Street between US 1 and the Old Dixie Highway. The request is to rezone from IL, which is light industrial, to CG, which is commercial general. And the purpose is to secure the zoning necessary to develop the site with uses that are allowed under the CG zoning. Future land use designations to the north, east, and south is all. The future land use designation is CI, which is commercial industrial. The west is the Old Dixie Highway and the Florida East Coast Railroad right-of-ways. And to the northeast, there is an L1 land use designation, which is low-density residential, but it is separated from the subject properties by US 1. In the review of the application, there's 4 areas that are analyzed. Those are the concurrency, consistency with the comprehensive plan, environmental impact, and compatibility with surrounding uses. For concurrency, we check transportation, water, wastewater, solid waste, stormwater management, and recreation. We found that sufficient capacity is available in all of these facilities. However, at the time of a development review, there would be a detailed concurrency review. Consistency with the comprehensive plan requires that future land use policies 1.15 and 1.16 be met. 1.15 is that the commercial property must be in the urban service area, which this is, and it must maintain from 1.16 the CI land use designation, which this property does have. So in this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Environmental impacts are the same for the CG zoning as it is for the IL zoning district, so there should be no difference there. For compatibility, to the north and south are zoned IL. Generally, sites that front along major roads like this are appropriate for both commercial and industrial zonings. To the east is zone CG, therefore there should be no conflicts or adverse impacts with those properties. And to the west is the Old Dixie Highway and the Florida East Coast Railroad, so there'd be the same impact whether it was IL or CG. In conclusion, requested CG zoning is compatible with the surrounding areas. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There is sufficient concurrency, and there's no additional environmental impacts, and staff supports this request. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the Board of County Commissioners approve the rezoning request.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions from commissioners of the staff? Would the applicant care to be heard?
Only if there's any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any no questions, and we need a motion to approve, please.
Move staff recommendation.
Greg?
Second.
Donna? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? I'm sorry, the Walgreens and CVS are both on the other corner. So, I know you've been in Montana a while, so I just want, you need to get back a little more often, so. Thank you, Dick.
Let me just say thank you for your approval, and thank you for your service to P&Z. I served 22 years sitting in one of those seats, either as a P&Z member or county commissioner, and I appreciate your service. And Bob and I go back to the adoption of the first comprehensive land use plan in 1975, and I wish we'd have had an empty chamber like this back in those days. Things would have gone a lot smoother.
Wait a minute. This is part your fault? I knew it. I knew it. If we'd known, can we revote? Can we reconsider this motion?
Can we make it more restrictive?
Thank you very much.
All right. Commissioners' matters. We have anything? We had the packet, and I had asked Stan maybe to take a minute, since we were not crowded on the agenda, to walk through briefly a very small incidental bill that came out called SB 360, and maybe the impacts that we might see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Stan Bowling, County Planning Director, and I'm just going to say a few words and then open it up for questions. I don't think the chairman would let me go along for very long on this. And if we were to walk all the way through Senate Bill 360, it'd be a long walk. It's 82 pages over 2,000 lines, and you all have gotten several handouts on it.
Thank you, Stan. We appreciate that. Anything else?
Are there any questions?
Now you'll keep your record.
I did this for Donna's sake, to keep the record intact for
Okay.
her.
A couple things I wanted to say about 360, though. Also known as Growth Management Bill or the Community Renewal Act. Generally, when you get legislation out of Tallahassee, there's the usual kind of sausage-making sort of process that it goes through, people throwing in amendments at the end, kitchen sink sort of stuff. But Senate Bill 360 seems to be particularly that way, and it's been kind of difficult to interpret certain parts of it. And so I think the interpretations of it and how to implement it and carry it out is still evolving. So there's no real, wasn't an immediate clear interpretation on a lot of issues. But DCA, Department of Community Affairs, really is in the lead, I think, of implementing it and carrying it out, which is why I gave you all the link to their website. And you might want to check it periodically, because they're posting items. They had one that was just posted this week, and I'll pass it out to you at the end of our discussion. But you might want to check it periodically, because they may have interpretations and things that come out, and they'll post them. It's right on you can get to it right off the homepage of the DCA website. Really just a couple things that I wanted to say in terms of the context of it. I'm just going to talk about two items that are in that 82-page bill, just to kind of highlight some things. One is that keep in mind that this is an amendment to Chapter 163 of the Growth Management Act. So it has a context to it. And it would be as if we were to change some small part of the sign ordinance. You've got to look at the entire thing when you're interpreting it, and look at the context of the whole thing. I want to talk about extensions, first of all. Extensions of development orders. That was one of the real economic development aspects of this bill. And any local development order that has an expiration date that goes back to September 1st, 2008, an expiration date on that date or after that, and expires before January 1st, 2012, under the Act, a local development order is extended for 2 years if the applicant provides a written request to the local government by December 31st of this year. It takes a little while to kind of wiggle through that, but and we've had a few of those requests come in, and granted.
Would we have many DRIs or anything like that?
Well, it's not just DRIs. This is any local development order, and development order is broadly defined. It is a preliminary plat approval. It could be a site plan approval. It could be a building permit.
We'd have quite a few then.
It could be an initial concurrency certificate that vests capacity. Oh. We have several of the 5-year initial concurrency certificates that have an expiration date between those two dates in 2010. And, you know, out in the field, it may not make that much difference, but they could request an extension of that under Senate Bill 360, and it would be granted. So far, I think we've had 5 requests come in. We've had 3 preliminary plats come in, and 2 site plans come in, and we've granted them. You know, we do the research if it falls between those dates, it's pretty cut and dry, straightforward. Then we update our records. And it keeps, you know, any conditions that were approved and so forth intact. But it does require a written request. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that transportation concurrency exception areas, TCEAs, that are in the Act. It's dealing, again, with transportation concurrency, and that's just transportation concurrency. The Act sets up and defines dense urban land areas, 1,000 persons per square mile, over 5,000 population. The unincorporated area of Indian River County is not a dense urban land area, but there are 2 municipalities, Sebastian and Vero Beach. The list came out, it's on the DCA website, it came out July 8th, so they are officially dense urban land areas.
In the county, inside the urban service area, other than the 2 cities, we're not really affected then?
We are not, no part of the unincorporated area of the county is a dense urban land area under the Act. Now, there is a part of the Act that does authorize, you know, a county to establish, if it wanted to, you know, could establish possibly a transportation concurrency exception area. But I'm just talking about right now what's automatic in the Act. A couple of things were automatic. One is if you meet the density, population density criteria, and you're over 5,000, you are a dense urban land area. And 240 some municipalities, 8 counties, they've been posted. I mean, they're certified by the state. They meet the criteria. They are a dense urban land area.
So the county misses this target because of the gross acreage.
The density.
The
Correct.
density, because
Population
we use our
density.
total gross acreage.
That's right.
And unless you define specific areas and redefine them, then
Right.
you would, okay.
That's correct. And Fellsmere doesn't meet it because of the density as well. Orchid and Indian River Shores are under the 5,000, so that's it. But Sebastian and Vero Beach are dense urban land areas. They are transportation concurrency exception areas. Now, here's where the interpretations come in, and we really looked at Department of Community Affairs on this. I think the department's look at this is that there are really 2 levels of concurrency regulations. There's the state-mandated regulations, and the transportation concurrency exception area really exempts those areas from the state-mandated concurrency requirements. But DCA also sees that local governments, through their comprehensive plans and their own land development regulations, have established their own concurrency regulations. And so their interpretation is that the Act automatically designates these as dense urban land areas and automatically takes away the state requirement for concurrency, but does not touch or affect what they have in their comprehensive plan.
I didn't realize it. So this is where the county overrides the state?
No. Well, in this case, Sebastian and Vero Beach.
Or the cities could.
The cities,
okay.
they can choose to just keep things as they are and keep their concurrency comp plan policies and their concurrency regulations as they are. Now, and so it remains to be seen. I mean, it's quite possible that Vero and Sebastian will want to keep things the way that they are. And if that does happen, they still, under the Act, they still are required to do some additional planning activities, mobility planning activities. In fact, they have a 2-year deadline now, July 8th, 2011, because that's when they were declared, 2 years from when they were declared a dense urban land area. They have certain planning activities for mobility strategies and so forth that's in the Act. There's not a lot of definition to that. There's a mobility fee study that is due, I think, to the legislature, reported to the elected folks there by December 1st. There's a whole mobility fee part of this which could replace proportionate share, possibly, maybe concurrency impact fees. we're not sure. That's the part of this act that, requires some future studies and future planning activities and so forth that is yet to occur. That's probably the most kind of open-ended part of the TCEA part of the bill itself. But, I don't think there'll be any effect, certainly won't be any effect on the unincorporated area of the county unless the county were to decide to designate something within the urban service area as a transportation concurrency exception area. And we'll see if Vero or Sebastian want to be exception areas. I want to just mention one other thing.
Can I ask a question quickly?
Sure.
You said that the cities, the way the DCA is interpreting this is that the cities can have their own concurrency, which would not be exempted under SB 360.
That's correct.
Okay. Do most cities have traffic concurrency regulations that are more stringent than the state requires anyway? So is this a meaningless change?
No, I think the purpose of the change, they may have the exact same requirement, but the requirement is in their comprehensive plan and in their LDRs. So the state is no longer going to require it. So now the local could change.
Well, I think what it's saying is that if the cities are stronger than the state, then
the state has gotten out of the business of concurrency.
It's kind of a meaningless
amendment. In the
TCEAs,
the state has said we will not require transportation concurrency in there, but we are going to require mobility planning activities in there, and there is going to be this mobility fee.
So let me understand. So is another way to say this is that they have kind of eviscerated the impact fees and the concurrency for traffic, but they have left a back door for municipalities, should they choose to call them mobility fees or something else, to rewrite them in the next year or two if they want to take that step. Is that?
First, let me say, Senate Bill 360 doesn't do anything with impact fees.
Well, what's this mobility fee then?
That's coming up, and it may replace impact fees. It may be on top of impact fees. Well, no one knows yet.
Okay.
But right now, it's just concurrency that is exempted. It's not impact fees. Completely different.
And it's state concurrency.
Yes.
Not city concurrency.
That's correct.
So if the city has a more stringent concurrency policy in regards to traffic than the state does, then
the 360s at
the 360s trumped right there at the city level. Is that correct?
No.
It doesn't affect the city. I mean,
let's go back. Right now, state law requires every local government in the state to have a concurrency system.
Mm-hmm.
And that concurrency system has to be consistent with the state concurrency requirements. Now, theoretically, every jurisdiction does. What the state is saying is we are no longer going.
They're allowed to have stronger rules than the state in the concurrency.
Sure.
Okay.
Any local government right now has to meet the minimum concurrency requirements.
Okay.
I understand.
What the state is doing for, I hate to say this, doulas. This is the acronym for dense urban land areas.
Mm-hmm.
Doulas.
For doulas, any local government that has a TCEA, and all doulas are TCEAs. For those areas, the state is not going to have any more concurrency requirements. The state concurrency requirements still apply to non-TCEA areas like us. Now, I think what Stan said is Vero Beach and Sebastian have concurrency requirements right now. They can opt to keep those requirements, and they would be just local requirements.
Which would mean that they didn't have any requirements but they have requirements in the sense that they elect not to follow the state concurrency under 360. 360 changes so they have a choice now.
That's correct.
And if they're stronger than the state, then they go with their own, then 360 is kind of meaningless. That's what we meant by meaningless.
I don't think.
Right, the only thing I would just say is it's not a matter of stronger than the
Strong,
state,
right.
because the
Yeah.
state is now zero.
Zero,
The state is
right.
now in those TCAs,
Okay,
they're
all right.
not going to get into the concurrency business, except
Okay,
they're going to
okay,
require
all right.
mobility.
So it's not whether it's better or worse, but if the city has a plan that's been, is in place, then they can elect that no matter
Right.
what.
They can keep it, so before it was a state mandate that you have this
Right.
plan, now it's,
Right.
you can have this, you cannot have it, it can be strong, it can be weak, it's up to you.
Right,
That's
so it's
right.
up to you, okay,
How does that affect mobility then?
right.
Well, the mobility is kind of to me, the kind of, let me just say one other thing, just that you know that, Bob is an impact fee type expert guy. He speaks on panels and such, and he can tell you all about, there are exceptions now to concurrence. There are allowances in 360, in 163 now. You could establish some, some of the denser areas to the south of us especially have established it. This is not a brand new concept. There are already some options. It's pretty stringent, but you can go through a process now and declare an area, transportation concurrency exemption area, more or less. But this really opened up that exemption to a lot bigger area, and automatically said, state is we're going to not require anything here, but it's not a complete free-for-all because there's the mobility planning, and they're going to they would have to amend their own comp plan and LDRs and do it in a justifiable way. But it does give them the option. And one of the reasons why they did this, I think there are two that are at least stated. One is for economic development and so forth, but I think even more than that, one of the knocks on concurrency has been that it promotes sprawl unintentionally, because it's in those denser infill areas that you're going to hit capacities early, and you're going to just spread development out to where capacity exists in the outlying areas until you eat up all the capacity there, and then maybe you've got some kind of equilibrium. So the knock against concurrency has been, it's been pushing development out to the areas where there's capacity in suburbia and exurbia, and what we want to do is exempt those infill of those denser urban areas and make it easier to develop and not have concurrency constraints in there. Maybe have different types of, transportation, mobility type of possibilities in there, so that we can have denser infill development. And that is why some have termed this as anti-sprawl, because it's meant to open up the denser areas, relax concurrency there, and start focusing on something other than just trying to build lanes for roadways. Yes. That's, I think, the intent or the concept.
So then do you go vertical?
Well, I think you might, but I think from a transportation standpoint, the idea is mobility. Are you going to have more transit? You're going to have more mixed use. You're going to have more internal capture, fewer external trips. There's strategies that you would have to do in lieu of building lane after lane after lane to meet some sort of level service standard. So that's the really kind of hard part of what's yet to happen, I think, in the next 2 years. All the local governments and some were actually mandated, the very larger ones, have to probably do more.
Are the cities going to keep their concurrency in place, or are they going to play ball with the state?
We have heard that Vero Beach is thinking about keeping it in place.
Is there a general feeling amongst the people that are in your field about which way this is going to go? I guess it's a political decision for every municipality.
I think so. The unusual thing is, even if, say, Vero Beach opts to keep its concurrency management system, they are still subject to the 360 rule that they have to come up with a mobility plan, because they are still, in the state's eye, a TCEA. So again, a mobility plan, like Stan said, it's going to focus at least on other modes. They're going to have to provide plans for and funding mechanisms for transit, bicycles, pedestrians, things like that. So they're still going to have to do that, even if they opt to keep their concurrency system.
I have a question. On the mobility issue, I assume is like mass transportation, that type of, is that what you're considering in mobility?
Mobility is really having, I think, a variety of modes to use. The whole idea, as Stan said, This whole idea of a transportation concurrency exception area is really great, particularly for big cities. I think the criticism of Senate Bill 360 is 1,000 persons per acre is not dense. It's not it's less than one house per acre. You know, you think we have a very low persons per household with 2.2 persons per household. And if you look, 1,000 persons per acre is less than 500 houses.
Per acre.
Not per acre, per square mile.
Per square mile, I'm sorry, per square mile. But anyhow,
640 acres.
where communities that have had transportation concurrency exception areas, TCEAs, for a long time, like Miami, say, and Tampa and Jacksonville, in their downtowns, that's where you want exception areas. You want to focus on buses. You want to focus on sidewalks. You want to focus on bikeways there. You don't want to 6 and 8 lane roads in the middle of the central business district. So it makes a lot of sense there. The problem is they just went too far and allowed a lot of jurisdictions that are not dense to be transportation concurrency exception areas.
Oh, how?
Because now they're
You're
designated.
like about 1.5 or one, that's 1.3 or something. I mean,
You wind up with small communities that are exception areas that don't really have, realistically, you're not going to get a lot of trips taken off the road by mass transit or so forth. And even worse, I think, again, it's some of the devil's in the details. You can imagine a county like Palm Beach County that might have, you might have small municipalities that are below 5,000 people, and they have to meet the state requirements, and then what's around them doesn't. And you could have situations where you have jurisdictions right beside each other, stringing along a roadway corridor, and they all have now pretty much different concurrency requirements. So that's going to be some of the difficulties, I think, in working it out. But again, what it means for Sebastian and Vero Beach, they definitely will have to do some of these mobility type of planning efforts, and we'll see how that develops. I mean, and there's over 200 other municipalities in the same boat, so people will be. You recall the same sort of thing, really. I think when school concurrency, was required, was mandated with another Senate Bill 360 a few years ago, and it takes a while to kind of figure that out and work your way through it and see how it implements. But those are just the two items that I wanted to hit on that I think have kind of the most impact. There's a lot of other things in there, but throw out your questions as long as the chairman allows.
have at it.
Stan, just our own municipalities are two major. Aren't they quite different as far as density and space is concerned? As far as mobility is concerned, I can see one of those perhaps needing much more of a study, and there would be more concerns. The other is close to being built out.
They lay out quite differently, I think, Vero Beach and Sebastian do. One thing that's kind of interesting in a way, I mean, concurrency and our level of service standards in the county and cities here really hasn't been much of a cap. It hasn't had that much practical effect in terms of, we haven't been behind. We haven't run into level of service problems in too many areas at too many times. So, what you wind up seeing on the ground, I don't know how much is, I don't know how much is actually going to change. But I think you're right in that, the two cities maybe have different layout and different potentials, and some mobility items that might work in Vero might not work in Sebastian, or might only work in some areas of it.
What are the one or two things that are going to have the most profound impact on the county that are in this bill? I mean, what do you think? What do you see that's really going to maybe affect us?
I would have thought initially in this downturn that, one of the opportunities in the downturn is that some of the older layouts that were approved that didn't meet some of the newer requirements, in this downturn, they go inactive, their approvals go away, and so then they get to be replanned. And initially, I had a concern that maybe the automatic 2-year extension would be an issue. But what I'm kind of hearing more and more from the due diligence people and the people that are looking to pick up these dead projects is they're going to retool them anyway. I think they're going to redesign them anyway. I think this 2-year extension actually could be helpful because it gives extend some entitlements, and while all this is getting worked out in the market, it at least, gives them a baseline that they know they've got that entitlement. I don't think it's really going to, I think a lot of projects are going to get redesigned and come in. They have to differentiate their product. There's just too much of the same thing out there. So I had an initial concern about that. I don't. I'm kind of seeing how it seems to be coming about the last several months.
But probably one thing that may really affect us is this mobility fee. And I've seen a draft of one of the mobility fee reports. There are two being done. One is being done by Cutter, Center for Urban Transportation Research. That's actually been one of our consultants, along with Jim Nicholas, who has been one of our consultants, and Arthur Nelson, who's been one of our consultants. And actually, that mobility fee report looks at three alternative ways to do the mobility fee. One is a road use fee that they said won't work. It's a great way. It's putting a transponder in everyone's car and then charging them by mileage and maybe doing congestion pricing, which is something great maybe in the future. Another alternative that they lean towards is a modified impact fee, and that's probably got the best chance. And the third alternative is what's called a transportation utility fee, and that is really trying to charge everyone in the county everyone in the area sort of like a stormwater utility does. It determines a stormwater utility, like Sebastian has a stormwater utility, determines how much stormwater, how much impact you're putting on the road. Yeah, it would do that and charge a certain amount.
So that would be like on our ad valorem tax bill every year, that we get charged X amount of dollars for and however many how many cars we have or something.
And this this report pretty much discounts that because the state Supreme Court has said right now it's unconstitutional. So the legislature would have to take some action on it. But the modified impact fee involves a few things, different ways to calculate demand, trying to get more on a vehicle's miles traveled. And also, really, instead of consumption-based, which is the way our current impact fee system is, this would be more improvements-driven, and it would be based on the cost of a mobility plan for a future period in time. Like for 2030, what is the cost of your mobility plan, which means, say, not only building roads, but building sidewalks, building bike paths, bus shelters, things like that. It's overall coming up with a mobility plan and getting a cost per vehicle.
But if you do tack on to an impact fee, which is what you're talking about, you're really, in theory, putting it into the future development to pay for what is really an overlap from the past, whether it's transgressions or the current population riding buses or bicycles into the future, and I don't see how that works either.
Bob, it sounded like you were talking almost about two different things. One was a mobility fee, which sounded from your description like it was mostly oriented towards passenger vehicles, and then there was the cost of a mobility plan, which is multimodal in its inclusiveness, and we'd be paying for that. Is there the potential then for targets or thresholds to be set for municipalities for, let's say, public transit systems that might be appropriate for a Tampa or a Jacksonville, but would be applied to Vero Beach and Sebastian,
which would be tough to meet.
Where we wouldn't be able to afford it.
No, and that's an excellent point, and that gets into the differentiation between the mobility plan and the mobility fee. The mobility plan would probably deal with headways, how often the buses come, and right now we have 1 hour headways here on our bus system, and we have real good geographic coverage, but we don't have 100%.
And if we're required to drop that down,
right, and each jurisdiction still has the flexibility to pretty much determine its mobility plan, although the state's probably going to promulgate some rules. But to give you an idea, Broward County was looking at 15-minute headways on their bus system, so that's a big difference. But the big thing here is, I think the way at least that one report that I looked at was going is the jurisdiction or the larger area comes up with a mobility plan, costs it out, and then base the mobility fee on the demand that the fee payer is putting on the system, and that is calculated based on the total cost of the mobility improvements over the whole period. And the specific fee is determined based on that increment of development's demand and the really cost of that demand. It's like an impact fee. It's kind of complicated.
I have a question. Have you looked at the numbers? How close would Vero and Sebastian be to being able to annex their way out of that?
Right now, I think they're both pretty close in terms of persons per square mile. One of them is about 1,600 and the other is 1,800. So they would have to annex quite a bit of property to not become Medulla.
And that brings up one of the other detailed possibilities is you could go in and out of being a dense urban land area. You could annex a large area and get out of it and then grow back into it. So every year they're going to post this estimate of whether, who makes it and who doesn't. So, which brings up another thing. Oftentimes there are glitch bills. So I think there's a possibility for a glitch bill. They certainly are going to do more, I think, with the mobility fee aspect of it. And there is a lawsuit from some local governments that have banded together to sue the state and say that to overturn the act.
This almost sounds like job security for the next generation of planners.
We were not complicit in getting
something about it doesn't feel secure, but you may be right.
Well, I have one question, my last question. Is there something that we should be doing as a county, not just as, Vero, Sebastian, whatever, as a county together with the cities, that we can start working toward being able to handle this?
That's just...
Well, I'm just going to mention that
our intergovernmental plan says, of course.
I was at most of the MPO meeting.
I'm not sure that's
and the mobility fee was mentioned, and I think the idea is that when the study is done and so forth, the DOT people there were talking about reporting back to the MPO. So I have a feeling that that's obviously one place where the joint planning effort would be discussed.
Would the new Florida Democracy? What's the new bill or new
Hometown
Democracy Act? Should it pass in 2010? What effect would that have upon this?
Well,
This is the next generation of consultants to planners, is what it sounds like.
That's right. There's a lot to think about.
That's right.
Well, that can affect anything that needs a comprehensive plan amendment, and you're going to get an article probably in your next info packet. If Hometown Democracy passes, then every comprehensive plan amendment has to go to a vote. It may be difficult to implement a lot of things.
Every or isn't there a threshold? I thought it was 10 acres or something.
There may be thresholds, and then again, the state legislature could change what requires a comprehensive plan amendment. So the state legislature could essentially create a back door if Hometown Democracy is passed. They could say, you don't need comp plan amendments anymore unless you're doing something really huge, and then everything underneath that threshold could just happen with the rezoning, and so there are even ways to
write the rules again
to get through that possibility. So there'll probably be a lot of updates like we're doing now in the next few years.
Thank you. Yes.
What is the new definition or the revised definition of the urban service area? That was, I think, your first bullet point in your summary, and I didn't read I just got my eyes crossed trying to read the bill itself.
Actually, this doesn't affect our urban service area. Our urban service area is really an urban growth boundary, and it's a line withdrawn. In terms of a county wanting to establish a TCEA, one of the allowances of a bill is a county can establish it within its urban service area. Now, according to the state's definition of urban service area as it's been revised, an urban service area is an area that currently has or is projected very soon, like in 3 years, to have facilities, urban facilities in place, facilities and services.
Water, sewer.
Basically water and sewer lines. Yeah. And it's also got to have, I'm not sure the correct dense, or it's got to have a certain amount of development in it. So it can't be just large vacant areas, even with water and sewer in it. It's got to have a certain amount of development.
So it doesn't affect us. Good.
Any other questions? If not, thank you all. At least that's somewhat of an overview.
One more goofy question.
We have one goofy question left.
I started to read the bill and gave up very quickly.
It made you goofy. Okay.
All the new terms that they had, but it looks like there's going to have to be a lot of definitions for the new terms and some of the terms they use. I noticed that if you have an area of critical concern, then school districts can use their sites for affordable housing for essential personnel. Can you tell me basically what that means?
A dogfight at the next school board meeting.
Let me just tell you, first of all, an area of critical state concern is specifically defined in the statutes, and there have only been, I think, maybe 3 designated. The Florida Keys is an area of critical state concern, the Green Swamp over in Lake County and a couple of other counties there, and there may be
Apalachicola
one more.
Bay.
Is it Apalachicola Bay? Okay. So I think there are only 3 areas of state concern. So it's not a far-reaching.
Yeah, it's not everywhere. Any other questions? If not, thank you all for going through that. George, any attorney's matters?
Not tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming out. We stand adjourned.